The whole town's chatting about Cincinnati. What a team, what a team, what a team. Man and lady from 1 to 80, how they scream, how they scream, how they scream.
Hello, Reds fans, and welcome to another edition of We Love Our Team. I'm Jack Greiner, along with my partner, Randy Freaky, and we are pleased today to have as our guest John Morris Russell. John is the conductor of the Cincinnati Pops, a position he has held since 2010. He is also the conductor of the Hilton Head Symphony and the Buffalo Philharmonic Orchestra. John grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, and in high school was part of a garage band that played cover tunes from the great funk horn bands of the late 1970s. John, welcome to our podcast. You are increasing the sophistication of this program simply by being here, so we appreciate it. How are you doing this morning?
All right. Thanks, guys. Fantastic to be here.
And I think our listeners should know that John is appearing while he recovers from a rotator cuff surgery, which is, as major league pitchers are apt to have Tommy John surgery, conductors are apt to have rotator cuff surgery. Am I right about that?
Yeah, that's true.
This is an occupational hazard.
Well, Jack, we're lucky. We're lucky John did not have that surgery right before he threw out the first pitch in 2011.
That's right. Of course, really, one of the great things about being in Cincinnati is that we have got a spectacular medical community here. And boy, I tell you, the doctor, in this case, it was at Christ Hospital, is outstanding, fantastic team. They're used to doing these types of things, and have just made it really, really easy. So I feel very, very blessed to be here in Cincinnati with a fantastic medical community.
What is the prognosis on your ability to throw the curveball going forward?
Well, I'll be giving an ictus there at the beginning of the pop season, the week after Labor Day. I've got a concert at Green Acres, and then the following week a concert with Rick Steves.
Really?
Rick Steves, who's doing kind of a travelogue of Europe along with the orchestra and some beautiful images. That's going to be broadcast nationally on PBS in a few months' time. And then right after that, the week after that, I'm conducting the soundtrack to Jurassic Park, which is the full film.
Oh, wow.
Dialogue and sound effects and everything, except the orchestra was stripped off the soundtrack, and we accompany the orchestra live to the film. So all of July and August, it's like getting myself ready for kicking off the season there in September.
Oh, that's fantastic. So will they be showing Jurassic Park at Music Hall? Will that be? Oh, wow, that's awesome.
A giant screen, and it comes down above the orchestra. And for about the first 10 seconds, everyone in the audience is saying, "Whoa, the orchestra is playing along with the film." And then after about 15 seconds, everyone just is watching the film.
They're just watching the dinosaurs.
And just kind of takes the music for granted.
Yeah, of course. I think it was before your time in Cincinnati, but at the Emory Theater, which is on Central Parkway there was a Wurlitzer organ, and They used to show old movies there, and with the Wurlitzer. It was really cool. It was really fun.
Well, the Wurlitzer still is still here. In fact, it's in Music Hall now.
Oh, is that right? Wow.
Yeah. And it's all been refurbished, and they still have the Friends of Music Hall has a little film series, and they'll play a couple of silent films every once in a while, accompanied by the organ. Everyone calls them silent films, but they weren't silent. Music was really, really important.
Absolutely.
And especially with that great old Wurlitzer, the music kind of is a character and drives the emotional aspect of the film. And something like where there's no spoken dialogue, the music is so much more important.
Absolutely. Oh, that's really cool. I'll have to check that out sometime. Well, now before we get to baseball, I do want to ask, what instrument did you play in the garage band?
Oh, I was a trumpet player. I also did a lot of the arrangements as well. Okay. And so it was like Chicago and Earth, Wind and Fire and Parliament, Funkadelic. man, we played it all.
Nice. Nice. What was the name? What was the name of the band?
Oh, unfortunately, our guitarist Keith McCann was a guy who signed the first contract, and we didn't have a name, and he just came up with something just like off the cuff.
Okay.
Sea Breeze.
What was it called?
Sea Breeze.
Sea Breeze. All right.
Yeah, that's.
Yeah, when I think of hardcore funk, man, I think Sea Breeze.
Sea Breeze is what it is. God bless Keith. He's had to live with this, live with that faux pas for the last 50 years.
I was on a conference call a few years ago with a couple other lawyers, and we were waiting for somebody to get on. And we just started talking about, what did you do before you went to law school? And this guy says, well, I was in a band. And I said, oh, what you guys, I don't know if you ever heard of this or not. I said, well, what's the name of the band? He goes, Wild Cherry. I'm like, Wild Cherry?
Wow.
That's like play that funky music, white boy. Are you kidding? Of course I heard of Wild Cherry. And he turned out he wound up going to law school because he felt like he got screwed on the royalties for the song. So he became an IP lawyer to never let that happen again. So,
well, it goes to show, and this is one of the things I talk about all the time, why it's important to have music in the public schools, in schools, for kids to learn music, to learn an instrument. It's not that we're going to populate our orchestras and jazz ensembles and all the rest. Yeah, I mean, everyone's got to have the experience as a kid of playing an instrument and being part of an ensemble. But a lot of it is getting your brain aligned and learning how to work with others and to problem solve and to be very creative and empathetic. And you take those skills and do whatever else you're going to do in your life. Right. I always like to say that. In the state of Ohio, if you get 90% on your algebra test or whatever, you get an A. If you go into the band room and you play 90% of the notes right, but you play 10% of the notes wrong, and you got each individual kid playing 10% of the notes wrong, you have complete and utter cacophony. And the thing is that in music, what about baseball, right? Man, you bat 500 and you are you're top drawer. But man, if you bat 500 and you're playing in the saxophone section, that ain't going to happen, right?
That's so much.
So the thing is, it's like my surgeon. I'd like him to be a musician because the value of 100%, right?
That's a great point.
And the whole thing about music is that it takes you beyond just 100%. You start at 100% and you go beyond.
Well, I'm playing the guitar. I started playing the guitar a few years ago, and I've yet to achieve 100%, John. So,
there we go. Practice.
Hey, Jack, we've got to get back to baseball.
Get back to baseball.
Okay, back to baseball.
Full disclosure, John. You grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, and so I suspect you were not a Reds fan as a child.
So I have the dubious honor of being born at the beginning of the Rocky Colavito curse. Are you all familiar with the Rocky Colavito curse?
Well, our listeners might not be. So why don't you fill our listeners in with the Colavito curse?
So I mean, Rocky Colavito. I mean, he was this fantastic batter, great fielder. I mean, just a real one of the Cleveland's greatest players. And he was around there during the glory years in the 50s, where the Indians were just a super powerhouse. And kind of like the Bambino there in Boston, he was traded in 1960. And then it was just like right after that trade, the Tribe never was able to get their act together again, right? They've just been in the basement. They haven't won a World Series since then. And so there I was growing up in the 60s in Cleveland, in that gigantic municipal stadium. And watching Sudden Sam and Rocky Colavito and really, we'd go to baseball games for the hot dogs and the Bertman's mustard. I mean, that was entertainment.
Now I want to know about Bertman's mustard because I went online. I think you can buy it on Amazon. It looks like, but it touts itself as being sort of the house mustard for the Cleveland Indians.
Well, and of course now the Guardians. And And the thing is, there's actually this rift. There were the Bertman family, and then there's another family as well. And somehow something happened, and they split up. And one of the families calls it Stadium Mustard, and the other family calls it Bertman's. And Bertman's is the original. It's kind of like Gold Star and Skyline to Cincinnatians.
Right.
Which way do you go? But it's this brown mustard, and it's got a special spicy kick. It's not your French's yellow, and I tell you what, it is fantastic. It just doesn't taste like a hot dog unless it's got Stadium mustard or Bertman's mustard on it. And it used to be they would have these giant tubs of it. I mean, they're like 2-3 gallon tubs with these great squirt nozzles. And, you'd go up there, you'd get your hot dog and you'd just fill the bun with this mustard because it was so good. And the hot dog was like a condiment to the mustard. And I was just at a game in Cleveland. Oh, it was a couple of years ago. And it just breaks my heart. Now they're just serving it in little packets. You can't even put it on yourself. It's like, oh. Times have changed.
Times have changed. You can't slather that hot dog with the Bertmans.
And of course, growing up in Cleveland, it was the time of the Big Red Machine. So all of us up north in NoO, we're always looking down, just thinking, oh my God, how does Cincinnati do it?
So I was trying to think of like some ballpark foods and that I liked, and they used to serve this thing. I think it was at Crosley Field. Randy, maybe you can help me out here if you remember. And I don't know if they ever served it at Riverfront, but it was this like sherbet on a plastic stick, and then when you licked all the sherbet off, there was like a little baseball player underneath all the sherbet. It was fantastic, but I don't think they don't. Well, not only they don't sell those anymore. I was at the Reds. I go to a lot of Reds games, but I just was paying. I was looking around a couple weeks ago. I don't think the Reds have vendors that go in the stands at all.
Really?
No vendors. No
That's
vendors,
away.
Jack.
Yeah.
Hey, John.
No beer,
John,
no hot dog. Go ahead.
John, what did you think of Municipal Stadium when you attended games there? I went there once, and it was cavernous.
Yeah, right? I mean, it was really gargantuan. And when I was there as a kid, there'd be so much room around, especially, there was always this tradition of, because they had those big old heavy wooden seats. And, when you're trying to rally the team, everyone would take a seat to your right and the empty seat to your left, and you'd grab both of them and you start pounding them down. Boom, 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 right? And, you'd have 1,000 people in there, doing that. Just 1,000 people, and it would make a racket. So there was, in the 1980s, in the early 1980s, I worked for the Northern Ohio Opera Association. It would bring the Metropolitan Opera to Cleveland every year and would play in a municipal auditorium. And the Metropolitan Opera would come, and it would be Opera Week. And, it'd be, Tuesday would be Tosca, and, Wednesday would be La Traviata, and, Thursday would be Götterdämmerung, whatever. And so we would actually keep a running total. It was always be in spring, about if we could beat the attendance at Municipal Stadium for the opera. And I tell you what, we were batting more than 500. The opera was bringing in more people than the then Cleveland Indians.
Was that a testament to the opera-loving residents of Cleveland, or just how bad the Indians were? Do you think?
I think it's a little bit of both.
Well, John, that brings up an idea I had. Back in the 1890s, on opening day, the Cincinnati Symphony Orchestra used to do a concert for 90 minutes before the game. And so I'm wondering if you ever thought about that idea. Why don't we have the Pops come down and do a concert on opening day for 90 minutes?
Hold on for a sec. Really?
Yes.
I have never heard of that before. In the 1890s, the orchestra, because the orchestra was founded, in 1895, I believe?
Yes.
And imagine back then that the orchestra would play on opening day.
Yeah,
That's
they would play for
incredible.
90 minutes. They would play for 90 minutes, and the games back then took about 90 minutes. And so
Wow.
it was a 3 hour afternoon. But in my research, I found that the stands would be full at the beginning of the concert.
Right.
It's not like today,
Oh,
the
yeah, where everyone
pregame
kind of wanders
ceremonies.
in.
Everybody, yeah, there's usually 2 or 3 thousand people there when they throw out the first pitch.
So Randy, I've got a question. Is there any? I mean, is there any archive to say what those concert programs were? I mean, I would love to find out what they were playing.
Absolutely. I can send some to you, John. I did some research. I did a book on opening day called The 150-Year History of the Cincinnati Reds Opening Day. And yeah, there's a lot of material about it.
Wow. Well, I'd like to find out about that. But to your point, Randy, the orchestra has for many years has played concerts associated with games. COVID kind of threw a wrench into the gears, but I think we're going to be back to it next year. Everyone write Phil Castellini and say we want the Pops back. We would do a Final Friday fireworks or a Fireworks Friday concert for several years, and would have the orchestra set up outside in like the fan zone, and then would pipe the music into the stadium. And so we would, and then all the music that we were playing live would be choreographed with Rozzie's fireworks. It was fantastic. There were a couple of seasons where when the Reds were really in the doghouse, and we prided ourselves that the number one attendance game of the entire season was opening day, and the second highest attendance was Pops on Final Friday on Fireworks Friday.
I
one of
remember
those.
those.
Yeah, and it was great. We got to get back to that. So our army of listeners will inundate Phil Castellini with demand for a return of the Pops on Final Friday. Yeah,
right on.
So have you transitioned your loyalties to the Reds, or are you still a Guardians fan? Where do you stand on this?
Oh well, I tell you what, it is kind of nice having an American League and National League, because then you can kind of say, hey, I'm for baseball in Ohio.
There you go.
But I tell you what, the Guardians are just going to town here. It's just been just incredible their streak, and they're looking so very, very strong. And so it does my heart. It kind of warms my heart. Who knows? Now that they've changed the name, maybe this is time to finally to do away with the Rocky Colavito curse.
I would hope so. I'll tell you, nothing better than an I-71 World Series if that's ever in the offing. That would be great. Now I got to tell you, you gave kind of a politician's answer there to us, with baseball in Ohio, but we had Mike DeWine on a podcast earlier, and we asked him if he had.
That's a good point. Eh?
Well, I'll tell you, to his credit, he said, "No, I'm a Reds fan. I just, born and raised." So, he was sticking to it. What other kind of interactions has the Pops had with the Reds? You've done the Final Fridays.
Oh yeah. Joe Sirhusen is a great friend of the Pops. Joe, as everyone knows, the voice in the Great American Ballpark, and what a voice! I tell you, it's really. And we've done a couple of projects with him in the past. We did a family concert with the Pops. This was maybe about 5 or 6 years ago, and it was all about. It was there in April, so it was like an opening day family concert with the Cincinnati Pops. And Joe came and narrated "Casey at the Bat," that great epic poem that has been set to music with the Pops. And in fact, just on July 4, he narrated "A Lincoln Portrait" by Aaron Copland. Along with the orchestra, and I tell you what, I've done this narration with a whole lot of people, and the Pops has recorded it with Kate Hepburn. The symphony just recorded it with Maya Angelou.
What?
And I got to conduct Gregory Peck in Vienna, reciting a Lincoln Portrait by Aaron Copland.
Oh, wow.
And I tell you what, Joe knocked it out of the park. Working with all these greats, Joe really invested in it. I mean, he really believed in the words and the message of the piece, and he was absolutely spectacular. I love him to death. He's a consummate professional and just an all-around great guy. So anytime I get the chance to work with Joe, it's always awesome. And also, John Schutte. Does that name ring a bell to anybody?
No.
He is the Reds organist.
Oh.
Well, hey, John, I've got a special surprise for you. I actually arranged for the Pops to come into the studio this morning and just play a slight rendition from, I think they might have played this on one of those Friday night. Let's strike it up. Let's strike it up.
Yeah.
There we go. That's Eric Kunzel wrote that one in salute to the Reds. He, of course, Eric, my predecessor as a conductor and the founder of the Cincinnati Pops Orchestra, was a huge Reds fan, and you'd go and have a party at his house, and there would be Johnny Bench just like hanging out, or Joe Morgan, just like, hey, going back to the fridge, hey, can you grab me a beer? Yeah. And so he made a fantastic CD called Play Ball, and so he wrote this the little jingle for the Reds, and Casey at the Bat is on that, as well as all sorts of other wonderful baseball themed orchestral music. It's a fantastic CD. I'm sure you can download it on Apple Music.
Yeah, we're gonna check that out. Well, now, had you ever heard of our theme song, "The Whole Town's Batty," about Cincinnati before?
Yes, indeed. I mean, as a lyricist, it's kind of tough to be able to write a song about Cincinnati, because it's just like, what word rhymes with that?
Well, we love that song, and that was a big hit. I think Ruth Lyons used to sing it back on her show back in the day for some of our older listeners. And Randy was able to, through some folks, we do have permission to use it, so we're not going to get sued. But we enjoy playing that. But boy, I'll tell you, the Pops, the Reds, the Eric Kunzel song. I don't know. We might have to think about this, Randy. I don't know. We may have to reconsider our musical choice.
Oh, okay. Now here's something let's put this out for discussion. Because there's so many teams that have got these musical themes that have nothing to do, sometimes absolutely nothing to do with the team, and yet they've become super iconic, right? You look at Boston Red Sox, right? You play Sweet Caroline, and, you see every Boston Red Sox fan just get all, misty-eyed, right?
Right.
What does that have to do with Boston or Fenway Park? Absolutely nothing. But I tell you what, it's a great tune, right? And everyone, it's got a great hook, and everyone can stand up and sing. It's fantastic. And it's something from popular culture that everyone knows. In St. Louis, they play the Budweiser theme, from the TV ad with the Clydesdales, right? And every game has got it, and everyone stands up and dances along. So I'm trying to think what song that is from the popular realm that might have some tenuous connection to Cincinnati, but everybody knows, and everybody can get up and dance to, or sing along with, and gets people up and moving.
Well, they're trying. I think for the last several seasons, they've been trying to sort of force feed that country song.
Exactly, force feed is the word.
one more hour and I'll be home.
Well, and I don't think it has to do specifically, it doesn't have to say Cincinnati or something. It just has to be something that makes you feel good.
All right.
Something that makes you feel good, like maybe something that might have been recorded at King Records.
That'd be good. Now,
yeah. Something that makes you feel good. Like I feel good.
Yeah.
I know that I should.
I like that. I like that.
There you go.
Now, what
I'll tell you what, so I'm referring to James Brown. I feel good, and we've taken the Pops on tour across Asia. All corners of the world. The Pops has performed live, and I tell you what, man, when you play James Brown, everybody knows it. The world knows it. And can you imagine there at the seventh inning or wherever it is, and you're playing "I Feel Good," and everyone in the stand starts dancing along with it? Oh,
Phil Castellini's inbox is going to be full after this.
there you go.
Probably.
I keep on telling Phil, man, it's like right in front of your nose, and you don't even know.
That's right there. So it's interesting you mentioned James Brown, because when you were talking about musicians having to bat 1,000,
right?
I had heard one time that his ear was so good that he could, he'd pick up guys in his band. If they missed a note, they would get fined.
Oh, and he would excoriate. I mean, he was a real son of a gun. He was not really beloved because he would hold all of his players' feet to the fire.
Wow.
And his rehearsals would go on forever, and he would just require just the absolute best from everybody. And hey, this is why he became the busiest man in showbiz, because he was so he surrounded himself with really good people, and he had extraordinarily high standards, and every night they would kill it.
Yeah. Well, that's what it takes, I guess. Now, so just on the idea of songs for Cincinnati, we had Eli Mayman on, who's the guitar player, the lead guitarist for Walk the Moon.
Oh yeah.
And I told Eli, he's a Cincinnati guy, great guy. Yeah. And I threw out to Eli that I have always wanted the Reds to play the opening of the Deep Purple song "Smoke on the Water" every time they hit a home run.
There you go.
And he volunteered to play guitar for it. He said he knows that song. And I'm just envisioning the symphony. I mean, I don't know if it would it be a bass drum? What would dun dun dun? I mean, is that
Oh well, I tell you what, we this is a great thing about the Pops, right? We take every type of style of American music, and we're gonna clothe it in great orchestral colors. So of course, we did Iron Man, right?
Okay.
And we made this great rock and roll classic, and we used percussion, was playing chains, and we had the bass trombones doing big flutter tongue glisses on their instruments. But I tell you, Deep Purple, Smoke Covered Water, easy. That'd be like tuba, bass trombone, double basses, contrabassoon. You put some contrabassoon, add a little rattle to it, right? You get Mark Wolfley, our Pops drummer, on that. He would absolutely kill it. So I tell you what, we should start thinking about our playlist for next year's Friday fireworks.
Absolutely.
At the Great American Ballpark, and we'll put Smoke Covered Water on there too.
And I think "I Feel Good" after every Reds victory would be great. Like they played New York in Yankee Stadium after the game. We could play "I Feel Good."
There you go. Absolutely.
Well, the 1990 team sort of adopted "Don't Touch This" as kind of their
right.
Or can't touch, or what was it? God, I'm terrible. I'm an old man. I'm an old man. "Can't Touch This" by MC Hammer.
Yeah, right.
That was kind of their big thing. Yeah. So that's great. Those are some great ideas. I like it. This is the beauty of this podcast, just the creative juices that flow.
Okay, so Randy, I gotta double back to the John Schutte, the Cincinnati Reds organist, who is a fantastic musician, super nice guy, and so we created this special piece for him to perform with the Pops. So he was making his Pops debut as the Cincinnati Reds organist. I tell you what, there are not that many baseball teams that still have an organist, and
Right.
it is like it is so cool to have someone there with this great audience who can lead the cheers and to play all of these classic tunes, and to have the flexibility to come in, come out. I mean, it really requires an extraordinary amount of talent. And every time I go there, I always make sure to give him a call, and you get to go upstairs and check out his little studio. He's got a fantastic view of the game and his whole organ there and the whole setup. It's really something extraordinary. So we had him perform with the Pops, and I made up this story. A lot of people still think it's true, but anyway, I completely made up this story about how Peter Ilyich Tchaikovsky, when he came to Carnegie Hall in 1893, just happened to be in Central Park and saw a game between the New York Giants and the Cincinnati Reds. And he was so inspired by the organist who was playing there in Central Park that he decided that he was going to write a concerto for baseball, organ, and orchestra. And so then we play this thing, and we hear the very beginning of the Tchaikovsky piano concerto, right? So here's the orchestra. Bam, 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 bim, bam, 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 bim, bam, 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 dim, bum, 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 bim, bum, 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 bim, bum, 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 bim, bum, 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 ya da da dee da dee, dee da da da, dee da dee. Anyway, this goes back and forth with these little baseball cadenzas interspersed with Tchaikovsky. I tell you, everyone in the orchestra could hardly play because they were laughing so hard.
That's awesome. That is awesome.
Half the audience was like, "Whoa, Tchaikovsky wrote a concerto for baseball."
So here's a good trivia question for you, John. Who's the only person to play for the Mets, the New York Mets, the New York Rangers, and the New York Knicks?
Whoa, I have no idea.
The organ player.
Oh, that's
and I know. I mean, that joke is better. I can't remember. I don't have it written down, but her name. I mean, it's a woman. I can't remember her name, but that's
yeah. Did you say her name?
Yeah, just say her name. She played for all three. So.
Wow, that's spectacular.
The other organ story I love so much was the White Sox organist, whose name I don't know, but apparently there was a streaker that ran out in a game, in the middle of a game, naked on the field. And, everybody's like sort of stunned, except the organ player starts playing, "Is That All There Is?"
Well, Jack, do you remember at Crosley Field, the organist at Crosley Field, when the umpires made a particularly bad call against the Reds, played Three Blind Mice?
Didn't the umpires
John, at Riverfront Stadium, the organist was so revered, they had him stationed behind home plate, like where the diamond seats are now, and he would literally raise up and play, and then they would bring him back down when the action came back on the field.
How about
tremendous.
that? Eh?
Yeah,
that's tremendous.
Did the umpires? Did they make him stop playing that song? Or I feel like there was a story to that.
I think they threw the organist out of the game.
You're out of here.
You're out.
Wow,
that's pretty great. That's pretty great.
So let's see. Here's some fun. Speaking of Chicago, I was just conducting the Chicago Symphony Orchestra just in the spring. It was a tribute to James Bond and the spy-fi music. Spy-fi. James Bond, Mission Impossible. The Saint. All sorts of TV and movies, based on, spy-fi. And they all have these themes that are all very similar. So I was talking about the theme of Mission Impossible by Lalo Schifrin, which has 5 beats. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2. It's kind of unique.
Yeah.
And so I'm explaining to the audience there in Chicago how, musicians, when you're playing something in 5, you have to keep on counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And what happens is you get kind of tired of just counting the numbers. So you just put a word, something with 5 syllables. So, it could be Sir Georg Scholti. Sir Georg Scholti was a very famous conductor. Chicago Symphony.
That was the first thing that popped in my mind. I mean,
Or Daniel Daniel Barenboim, another conductor of the Chicago Symphony, or Riccardo Muti, 5. John Morris Russell. So of course, I'm telling this audience, and most of them are getting it because it's a Chicago Symphony, so they know conductors. And I said, well, for those of you who are not not crazy about conductors, you could do something that would be like on the minds of everyone in Chicago. World Series, White Sox, World Series, White Sox. Now that's mission impossible. I killed them.
That's a good one. Oh my goodness. Well, one of my favorite, baseball music crossovers, John, was, and I think I've told this story a little bit on the podcast before, but I happened to be in Chicago and wandered into Ernie Banks's funeral. It's kind of a long story, but it was pretty amazing. But they had a gospel choir, and as they wheeled Ernie Banks's casket out at the end of the funeral, the gospel choir started singing "Oh Happy Day," and it was like the most cool thing ever. And I came home the next day and I mentioned to my family how much I enjoyed that. And my oldest daughter, who's very organized, got on the phone and started calling to find out where she could get gospel choirs in the event of my funeral. And I was kind of like, well, hey, Katie, let's just, pump the brakes here a little bit. I'm not expecting that to happen anytime soon, but I appreciate the gesture, but for goodness sake.
Hey, John, if you were a Major League Baseball player, what song do you think would be your walk-up song as you go up the bat?
Wow, eh? So there are actually a couple of tunes. There's this one piece of music that was actually written for me by Pete Anthony. He's a Hollywood composer. He does all of the M. Night Shyamalan films. He's like his composer, but he's done all sorts of films and orchestrator. So he created a work for me called Conductor's Theme. So it might be that one, just because it's kind of heroic and. But I mentioned this one earlier just because it's such a fantastic Pops track, and that is "I Am Iron Man," and I can just imagine myself, hitting the bat against my cleats to get the dirt out, as I'm getting ready to go.
That's nice. That's awesome.
Did you play baseball as a kid?
Yeah. I was in Little League. I did Little League as a kid. So. And it got to the point where, I went from one level to the next, and all of a sudden there are these kids throwing these balls at like blazing fast speed, and I couldn't figure out to get my timing right. Couldn't figure it out at all. So that's when I decided, well, maybe trumpet is the thing for me.
I was thinking that my impression of Major League Baseball players is that, they start playing as kids, and then some of them discover they really have a gift for it, and then they kind of hone their skills in college or minor league before they get to the majors. Is that a process? Is there a similar process for symphony musicians? Do they sort of have to work their way up the ranks to get to like a Cincinnati Symphony or?
Oh, absolutely. I was talking about music education. It's the same thing. I mean, did you all play in Little League when you were kids?
Sure.
Yep.
Yeah, and the thing is, you're not playing in Little League to become a professional ball player. Everyone plays Little League because it's fun and it's, it gets you outside and, it's great exercise and all the rest. And you develop this love for the game. And, and then, it becomes kind of part of your essence. And, it's the same thing with music. I think every kid needs to have the opportunity, to like it is to play on some sort of sports team, to play an instrument, to sing in chorus, to be, somehow involved with music. Because not everyone, only a very, very, very small fraction of people are going to go into it professionally. But it's more than just trying to find something that's going to make your career. And so the thing is that there's so many players, who will start to they'll take Suzuki lessons, when you start to be 5 years old or something, or as a wind player, probably when you're in your tweens. But you'll find that what happens is, you play in your school ensemble, you play in a youth orchestra, you're taking lessons, you go off to college, and get an undergraduate degree at a conservatory for 4 years, study with a teacher. And after you finish that undergraduate degree, sometimes you get into a pre-professional orchestra, which is kind of like the minor leagues, or you might go to graduate school, which would be like being at a really high level a collegiate program in sports. And it's those players, who are in their mid-20s who start to take auditions, and with major orchestras, and will start to win a position. And actually, the audition process is very interesting. It all takes place behind a screen. So that anyone who's auditioning, you have to play, anywhere between 5 and 10 minutes of some of the most difficult excerpts, some of the most difficult passages in a Beethoven symphony or a Brahms symphony. You have to play a solo, and they judge everyone on those same excerpts, on those same little pieces of music. And, one of them might show how fast you can play, another one how well you can keep things in tune. Another little excerpt might show how you can go with musical flow. Anyway, but all of those excerpts are played for a committee behind a screen, so that no one on your committee can tell if you're a boy or a girl, or have one leg or two. In fact, they put a carpet there, so you can't hear if someone's walking in with heels, or whether they're walking in with sneakers, or whether they're rolling in a wheelchair. It's completely anonymous, and so it's all based on purely your ability to make music. You win a major audition like Cincinnati Symphony, and it's a gig for life. It's fantastic. And, we will have hundreds of people auditioning for a single position in the orchestra, and they will literally come from around the world to play, because they want to be in Cincinnati, because it's a fantastic orchestra. It's got a worldwide reputation, but also because you get to live in Cincinnati, where the cost of living is not New York or San Francisco or Chicago. And it's a great town. And they've got a professional baseball team.
Absolutely. That's really fascinating. That's just fascinating to me. I did not know. That makes so much sense to just base it just on the music. I mean, I think that's to talk about baseball. That's a little similar to what I think, the Moneyball was trying to do. That they wanted to, scouts said, oh, that guy looks like a baseball player, and so Moneyball tried to go to advanced statistics and that sort of thing to say, yeah, he looks good in the uniform, but this other pudgy guy gets on base a lot more, sort of thing. So,
well, you're always looking for, people who are going to contribute to the orchestra. Especially when, there's a position that opens up that doesn't open up for a long time, you have to be really particular about that person. Kind of the Moneyball, analogy, I think, works with kind of smaller orchestras, like an orchestra like the Hilton Head Symphony Orchestra, where, we don't pay nearly, what a musician in Cincinnati or New York or Boston is going to get paid. And so you get players who may not have like the complete package. And so we're always looking for someone who complements what, some of the other weaknesses that the orchestra might have. So it's just like, myself, I like to be able to have an ensemble that has great rhythm, that they play together. It's that aspect of team, right? And it's not like I'm looking for a superstar. I'm looking for people who can play well with others, who can work alongside of others and can contribute to the whole. Because even if you've got a lot of individual musicians who have little weaknesses here and there, which is perfectly, it's human nature. But if you can find and align things that I got that player who I always know is going to be able to get to first base, right? I've got that player who I know is always going to be consistent in that one aspect, so I can kind of check that off a list in terms of what we need to create a really great ensemble.
Yeah, that's the movie Miracle, the hockey movie about the 1980 Olympic team. Herb Brooks said, "I'm not looking for the best players, I'm looking for the best team." Which is
yeah, that's absolutely right.
Different. Yeah, that's fascinating.
Yeah, it was interesting. My daughter, both my kids. My son played viola in school orchestra, and my daughter was a pianist, took piano lessons. And there's a certain point in time she was getting into high school, and she just got turned on to rowing. And it was like, you're a rower, you got to put a lot of time in that. And she was trying to row and trying to play piano at the same time. And finally she came to me and said, "I can't do piano anymore, Dad. I'm going to be a rower." And of course, I'm crestfallen. Thank you, Alma, for breaking your father's heart. Anyway, it was at the same time that book, The Boys in the Boat, came out, right?
Fantastic book.
Right. And so, I'm drowning my sorrows by reading this book. And this book talks about the whole aspect of team and music and rhythm and, all of those beautiful things that come with being part of something that's greater than yourself. Right. And that's how I completely came to peace with it, because it's like, that's exactly what music, this is what I want music to teach. It's what we want to get out of athletics. It's what we want for our kids is to learn to play well together. And, you can take that to music. You can take it to sports. I think we should take it to politics as well, right?
Yeah, that's a great idea. That is a great idea. Well, John, listen, I know we're coming up on time, and Randy and I've really enjoyed this conversation. This was a lot of fun. One more music idea for the Reds, just one more, and I think the Pops would be perfect for this. I'm thinking every time Ellie De La Cruz gets on base, you play the William Tell Overture, just da, 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 da.
When he gets on base, you'd have to do it very, very quickly, because, oh my God, that guy's so fast, right? As he's stealing from one base to the next. Right. There's something, you can only do it a couple of times with your orchestra, but I come Olympics time, I always like to play, Flight of the Bumblebee by Rimsky-Korsakov. It takes 60 seconds, and everyone tries to play it faster than the next.
Right.
So I'd have this one little shtick in a concert where it would say, "And now, ladies and gentlemen, the Cincinnati Pops is part of the Orchestral Olympics, and we are vying for the fastest performance of Flight of the Bumblebee ever." Right? And I think we've been practicing all week. I think we're ready to break the new record. And so, I get my assistant conductor. He's out there with a stopwatch, and I've got my baton poised, and the orchestra's all ready. And then I raise my hand up, and then you hear, "Pop! All right, I think we broke a new record."
When you talk about, you're conducting down at Hilton Head, have you met Greg Russell?
Yes, yeah, we have.
All the Ohio listeners know who Greg Russell is because they go to Hilton Head. Everybody goes to Hilton Head. He's been there for 47 years and plays in Harbortown
for all the kids.
But for all the kids, but he does, one of his songs that he does a lot of is the unicorn song. Green alligators and long neck geese, and they have like hand motions where it's green alligators, long neck geese. And he'll get kids on the stage to do it, and then he plays it real fast and tries to get the kids to keep up, and it's just, and they do. That's the thing that's just so amazing. They just do it so fast. I mean, it's great.
That's fantastic. Well, for those of people who might go into enemy territory and be going to St. Louis at any point in time, in February, I believe, of 2025, I'm going to be doing a concert with Adam Wainwright. Who was a fantastic all-star pitcher a longtime pitcher for the Cards, and he's now created his second career as a musician, and his big hit called "Hey Y'all." And so I'm going to be conducting the St. Louis Symphony Orchestra with Adam Wainwright. We're going to do some baseball themed stuff as well. So that's
fantastic. That's fantastic.
Anyone who wants to come down to St. Louis in Feb.
He's a man of many talents because he converted to an outfielder after his pitching days were over. So he was he was a pitcher and outfielder. Now he's a musician. So
and
that's
doing
great.
quite well. He's a super nice guy, and he's got a real knack. So
That's awesome.
It'll be fun to work with him.
Well, John, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it. Best of luck on your recovery. We'll follow up with Phil Castellini and try to get these great ideas implemented at some point. And again, just this was great fun. So thank you very much.
Thanks so much, guys. Peace.
Thank you, John.
Cheers.
Oh.
The whole town's batting about Cincinnati. What a team, what a team, what a team. Man and lady from 1 to 80, how they scream, how they scream, how they scream.